I thank the House. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On indulgence, over recent weeks, Australians have been responding to bushfires across the continent. Many of us here in this place have sat with those who have bravely fought them, tirelessly supported those who have been fighting those fires. We've sat, as I did with Owen Whalen up there in Taree, listened to their stories, held their hands, tried to offer words of comfort wherever we could. But mostly we have been simply amazed once again that in Australia's most difficult moments, we always find the best of Australians in the way they respond to these events. I would like to update the House on the fires as we know them now and recent action in relation to the fires as they have spread across the country. Dangerous fires in New South Wales continue to burn. More than 1.4 million hectares have been burned. As of this morning, there are more than 60 fires burning. More than 1,900 firefighters and support personnel, along with 95 aircraft, have been battling these fires. Tragically, 4 people have lost their lives and dozens more have been injured, including those fighting the fires. Over the past 2 weeks, more than 550 homes, not just buildings, homes, have been destroyed, and nearly 1,000 more outbuildings. In Queensland, fires are continuing to burn in the southeast. They've burnt through 183,000 hectares since September. 55 fires are still burning across the state. 20 homes have been confirmed lost. More than 3,600 firefighters have been on the front line for more than 2 weeks, along with aircraft. Nearly 50 firefighters have sustained injuries, including the pilot of a water-bombing helicopter that crashed near Toowoomba. The situation is ever-changing, and a state of fire emergency has been declared across 42 local government areas. In Victoria, we've seen an easing in recent days following the catastrophic fire conditions of last Thursday. This easing should assist firefighters in coming days battle the fires as they continue to burn. Last week, parts of South Australia experienced catastrophic fire conditions. 16 houses have been destroyed, along with 21 other structures, and 4 firefighters were injured. While conditions have eased, fires continue to burn across southern parts of the state. And we are watching in Western Australia closely. Severe to extreme fire dangers are forecast today over southern and central fire weather areas. Mr Speaker, the government, through Emergency Management Australia, is working very closely with its state and territory counterparts, and I want to place on record my deep thanks and appreciation for all the premiers for working so closely with the Commonwealth, and I thank them each for their leadership in their respective states during these difficult times. We work in partnership, everyone knowing their jobs and their responsibilities. It's no different at a government level than it is when you're out in the incident response centre or you're on the fire ground itself. Everyone needs to know what their job is and get it done. I want to acknowledge the tremendous national effort taking place, with firefighters travelling from every state, as well as from New Zealand and the United States, where I've had the opportunity to thank both the President this morning and, of course, the Prime Minister of New Zealand earlier. We also thank those who have come from Canada to help where it is needed. Firebombing aircraft have been in action against these fires, and these are national assets and ensure the best possible aerial firefighting equipment is available to help Australians. As well, the RAF have transported firefighters and equipment to and from centres across the country. Disaster recovery assistance is being provided under the jointly funded Commonwealth State Disaster Recovery Funding arrangements. In New South Wales, on-the-ground assistance is coming from the state government also. We are also providing extra financial assistance to the Australian Government Disaster Recovery Payment. This is a non-means-tested payment of $1,000 for eligible adults and $400 for each child. There's also the Disaster Recovery Allowance, which is a short-term income support payment to help those who have experienced a loss of income as a direct result of the bushfires. The Disaster Recovery Payment has been activated in 14 local government areas in New South Wales, and the allowance has been activated in 32 areas in New South Wales. Both of these payments are administered by the Department of Human Services. Yesterday in New South Wales, working with the state government, we announced $48.25 million in bushfire recovery package assistance for the North Coast, Mid-North Coast and the Northern Tablelands. This package includes $15,000 recovery grants for small businesses and primary producers and an $18.25 million community recovery fund to fund community projects that stimulate the economy, build resilience and provided much-needed mental health support as well. In Queensland, we're providing disaster recovery assistance under the DRFA in 7 local government areas, and this includes support for people suffering personal hardship to help with their immediate emergency needs, as well as things like concessional interest rate loans and freight subsidies for primary producers. We've also activated the Disaster Recovery Payment, the AG-DRP, and the Disaster Recovery Allowance, the DRA, for people affected by the Queensland fires, and this is supported and administered by the Queensland Government, with whom we continue to work extremely closely. Mr Speaker, I can report that every agency of the Commonwealth stands ready to help and has, wherever they can. Across government, the necessary plans and responses have been activated. The ATO has activated their Community Disaster Rapid Response Group to support impacted taxpayers and communities. Taxpayers affected by the fires don't need to worry about their tax affairs. First things first, let's get them back on their feet. The Department of Health has been working with pharmacists regarding the supply of medicines to affected communities. The full resources of our Defence Forces have been available to assist when and where it has been requested. The Minister of Defence has directed and authorised all local base commanders to provide immediate assistance where it is required. The work undertaken across Australia in recent weeks has been the result of painstaking preparation. I shudder to think of what might have occurred had we all not prepared accordingly. In a continent as big as ours, it is not a question of if a natural disaster hits, but when, and fire particularly so, as has long been the case. Since the aftermath of Black Saturday, Commonwealth, state and territory governments have actively maintained a level of national preparedness that should reassure all Australians. Our preparedness for natural disaster includes $130.5 million investment by the Commonwealth over 5 years to reduce the risk and impact of disasters on Australians. As part of this work, $104 million is being distributed to states and territories under the new National Partnership Agreement on Disaster Risk Reduction for investment in initiatives that reduce disaster risk at the state and local level. As well, we have developed closely with state, territory and local governments a national disaster preparedness framework to ensure we are positioned to effectively prepare for, manage these severe and catastrophic disasters. This framework is about a new national disaster capability so that people have access to the best information and guidance needed to make informed decisions. And I've seen this at work. I've seen this at work, Mr Speaker, over these most challenging last few months. Our support of the National Aerial Firefighting Centre, an annual investment of $15 million, has provided highly specialised firefighting aircraft that is available to states and territories. And in December last year, foreseeing that we'd be seeing more longer-lasting fire seasons, we added another $11 million on top of our annual investment. We've also invested in emergency alert, supporting the national telephone-based warning system, and we invested over $6 million in the next generation of Australian fire danger rating systems to deliver more accurate and local risk messaging. Again, I've seen it in action. Our efforts are all about working in partnership with the states and territories, particularly the fire and emergency service professionals. As the providers of police and emergency services, the states and territories take the lead, and we back them in on their capabilities. All work in such dynamic environments, of course, can be improved, but I am incredibly proud of the progress and the effort that has been put in right across the country, led so ably by our state governments, preparing for the worst wherever and whenever it may be, and called into action when it is required. At times like this, we need to remind ourselves of those fundamental truths, that while properties are lost, it's the lives of our families and our loved ones who ultimately matter most. I am in awe of our countrymen and women who have all stepped up in this very recent time, as they always do. Our firefighters, our volunteers, servicemen and women, community members, neighbours, as well as the businesses who I particularly say thank you to enable those who needed to volunteer to go to the aid of their community. Everyone has been playing their part. It has been a time when we've seen our nation's best at their best. We're prepared and we will continue to act. I know more broadly there are debates about other issues, and they are rightly have a place for debate in this country. They're important issues. But our focus now, and will continue to be, of those directly affected by these fires on the ground. That's where our effort will remain, and we thank all of those who have come to their own.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for his statement to the Parliament. I also thank Minister Littleproud, the Minister for Emergency Services, who has made a number of phone calls to myself and has worked cooperatively with Labor's Shadow Minister, Senator Murray Watt, on these issues in what has been difficult weeks. I would like to also begin by remembering those Australians who have lost their lives in these fires. Julie Fletcher, Barry Parsons, Vivian Chaplin and George Knoll. 4 Australians who've lost their lives is 4 too many. We cannot know what it was like for them the moment that hope ran out. Our hearts break for them and for those that they have left behind. We think of everyone who has wrestled with that most awful of dilemmas, whether to stay and fight fires or to go. We think of those who have lost their homes and all the comforts and memories that were held between those familiar, cherished walls. Everything that adds up to the sense of place that centres each one of us. All of it gone in moments. But just as we see the worst, we've also seen the best of our great country and our magnificent people. I travelled recently to some of the fire-affected parts of New South Wales, including to Lismore, Casino, Nimbin and Ballina, and there I spoke to the Rural Fire Service, I spoke to firefighters, I spoke to people who were impacted, people who'd been displaced from their homes. And there I was particularly at the briefing in Casino. It was very good that we invited along the local member, Kevin Hogan, who came with his wife Karen, Justine Elliott, the member for Richmond, and the state member for Lismore, Janelle Saffin, a former member of this place, along with the Mayor of Richmond Valley, Robert Mustow. And there we got a comprehensive briefing about what was going on the ground in those communities. There also I got to introduce my fellow parliamentarians to my cousin, Shirley Smith, who lives by herself in Rappville, who was affected by the first fire that went through and just devastated the whole community. So she has experienced it very much firsthand for a long period of time, and she was able to come and thank people who'd helped to save her actual property. But as a horse owner, there was a real issue for her and for that entire community on the ground, and many people who were displaced in Rappville, that I think is in the electorate of the member for Page, haven't gone back yet to their homes. They're still, some of them literally living in tents under these extraordinary circumstances. So it's been a calamity, but what we've seen is communities pulling together, neighbours helping neighbours, friends helping friends, stranger helping stranger. The extraordinary sights of human beings helping koalas and other animals, just going into danger in order to protect native wildlife. And the extraordinary firefighters and emergency workers putting themselves so selflessly into harm's way, whether it be on the ground or in the air. They have courage in such abundance that we can only express our awe and our gratitude. In each place that I visited, I asked, was there anything practical on the ground that could be done? And in Nimbin at the town hall, they're essentially using that space to feed the firefighters who've come in while I was there from Victoria and from other places who've helped out. And there what they said was they had lots of food coming in, but they had nowhere to keep it overnight and with the heat, so they asked for some practical assistance. And so I rang someone I know who's a member of the Woolworths board. Within hours, the head of Woolworths Supermarkets, Claire Peters, was on the phone, and within 24 hours a truck delivered 3 fridges, 3 freezers, a pallet of water and a $1,000 voucher. So this is a time whereby, whether it be volunteers in the community, or whether it be businesses, we all pitch together as a nation, and that has happened. Stories like that, I know, have happened right around the country. As the fires rage on, we try to soften the blow by telling ourselves what we always do, that this is Australia, a price we pay for living on such a beautiful but harsh continent. And we know that there have always been natural disasters in this nation. But we know also that this isn't just fire as usual, because experts are lining up to tell us that climate change does mean longer and more intense fire seasons. We are seeing places that should be strangers to flame incinerated before our eyes. I have certainly approached this, and Labor has approached these issues in a bipartisan spirit, and I know that any practical requests that we have put forward have been well received by the government. We know that the immediate priority is, of course, protecting life and protecting property. And we also know that we are so grateful to the emergency service personnel and volunteers. But the fire season is starting earlier and finishing later, and our emergency leaders agree that extreme weather events in Australia will only increase in their severity and their frequency. And that's why I've written to the Prime Minister constructively to say that we need to continue to examine our preparedness for natural disasters. I've suggested calling a meeting of the Council of Australian Governments that is due to look at some practical measures, steps towards a new national strategy for disaster preparedness, ensuring emergency services and national park services are appropriately funded at a state and federal level, expanding the capacity of Australia's National Aerial Firefighting Centre and providing appropriate funding, investing in research on natural disaster response, recovery and mitigation, measures required to attract, retain and appropriately reward volunteers and to enable businesses to support their staff who choose a volunteer. There are many of these volunteers now who have been absent from their work for many, many months. We need perhaps to consider measures such as leave for those volunteers in order so that it's not a choice between staying with the commitment they have to helping their fellow Australians and losing their employment. Developing an action plan around climate adaptation, bring forward the disaster mitigation funding in recognition of the immediate dangers and impending disaster season. We don't have the luxury of time, and we should consider these issues not in a way that creates rancour, as some of the unfortunate debate has in recent weeks. It needs to be considered in a sober way, a way that considers the way forward based upon the facts and based upon the scientific advice that we're receiving. I'll finish with the words of Queenslander Denise Welsh, just one of our fellow Australians left to ponder the smoke and ash of the dream that she shared with her husband Tony. She said this: "All of our friends, a lot of them are in the same boat as us. So we just hug each other, I guess. That's all we can do." There's been a lot of hugging in recent weeks. We wish it wasn't so, but out of that has come some amazing stories of courage and resilience of the people of this great nation.
The